Hi friends, today I'm going to quickly show you how to take your project from Cubase. In this particular instance I'm going to be using Cubase 9.5, but this should work easily for version 7, 8, and 9 because the interfaces are all pretty close to the same. If you're using something earlier than that, it'll still work, but you'll have to probably hunt a little bit for these menus. So here's the project I'm going to bring in, and I'm going to make straight output files that have all my edits. So when I bring it into Mixbus, I'll have every channel separately. I like to zoom out so I can see what I'm working on. Now there's a few housekeeping things we need to take care of. First, I don't want this at the end, so I'm going to just delete this and get rid of this track because I'm not going to use that. That's just a personal thing. So let's remove those. Make sure that your input and output markers, your in and out markers for the entire project are selected and cover the length of the entire project. So we have our in and out markers. I'm covering the entire project. Secondly, open up any instruments that you have. Now, you may have a bunch of instruments, you may only have one. The reason you want to do this is because you want to make sure that if you have an instrument like Halion Sonic, which I'm using here, that has more than one sound within the instrument, you want each of those sounds or those synths going to a separate channel. Makes it easier to mix. So let's do that. We're going to activate a second output because I have a second instrument here. And here's my first instrument, second instrument. I'm going to change the second instrument to output 2. So now all of my instruments are going to separate tracks, which is, to me, important. Next, hold down Control and click each channel while you're holding Control to zero the faders. The reason being is you don't want your mix to go over. You want separate tracks to go over at the volumes at which they were recorded. Now, it's important to note that when you make tracks the way I'm about to make them, if you have EQ and inserts applied to a track, they will be applied to your output track that you're sending to Mixbus. Keeping that in mind, I don't want to have any EQ on these tracks, so I'm going to hit F3 to bring up my mixer and turn off where I have EQ applied to tracks, so my tracks are as recorded again. Also, if you want to turn off your inserts, you do it the same way. You could have done that in the mixer as well, but in this particular case I'm doing it here because actually I want to keep my inserts. This is a very synthy track, and I want the chorus that I have applied here, phaser, or the chorus that I have applied here, or the delay that I have applied here. I want those to stay with the tracks. Now, it doesn't really matter what's on the output track because we're not going to use it. Alright, so I've done that. I have all my tracks good to go. They're all centered. I have my inserts and EQ either turned off or on, as per your taste, I should say. And now I'm going to output. So it's under the File menu, pick Export Audio Mixdown. Make sure you have this Channel Batch Export selected. Then select everything but your output tracks. I mean, you could send the output track too, but it would be a hot mess seeing as we just zeroed everything. Doesn't matter what you put here, you can put anything you want because Cubase is going to ignore that. What is going to matter is where your output is. So this makes a temporary file. I mean, it can be permanent and be something you keep if you want, but when you bring it into Mixbus, one of the options is to allow it to copy those tracks over into Mixbus, and I always do that. So going to make a temporary track here, select it, not track folder, and then make sure that my sample rate matches my project, which it does. Also, before you leave Cubase, you want to take note of your tempo and your time signature. If you're using a tempo track, well, that's something I'm not going to get into today. This is going to assume that your entire project is one tempo. So export. Okay, my tracks are exported. Or you could even do a save as and then just put like a -mix, and that way you'll have a separate Cubase project that brings you back to this exact point. It's a good idea. Okay, so let's quit Cubase and load Mixbus. Okay, so now we're going to start a new session. Create a folder. We'll call it 5 Mixbus in this particular case, and that's where we're going to put it, and we're going to call it. Make sure again that you have the correct sample rate selected when you start here. Go to the editor and hit Control-I to import your tracks. Find your folder. Select the first track, hold Shift, select the last track. I personally like to keep my stereo pairs together, so I'm going to change this to 1 track per file, but you could leave it at 1 track per channel if you didn't want your stereo pairs together but wanted them on separate tracks. Import. Notice that I left copy files to session selected. back to our mixer. Here's all our tracks. Okay, so here's your first trick. First trick is Control-T. Notice that it selects all of the tracks. Then hold down the down arrow on your keyboard, and as you do, all of your tracks are going to go... Well, they were not going to go to infinity because I think that's kind of a funky thing about Mixbus, but they're going to go low enough that it doesn't matter. I do that because I like to bring up my tracks one at a time as I'm working them into the mix. I don't like them all on and then just unmuting them. By doing this, one thing you'll notice is that it will never hit infinity, meaning it will never be totally off, but you get it down to 120 and it's close enough. You're done. Okay. Last thing, because if you did that, select your main output track, your master track, and double click on it. Let's do a couple of quick little housekeeping things in Mixbus that I like to do. I like to turn off all my buses except the first one and add them as necessary just to declutter. I'm also going to do the same here and bring in my tracks one at a time. I'm going to move my bass up next to the drums and then turn everything else off. It's all there, it's just not in my view and it's not cluttering up my view, and that's what I want. Okay, so now I have bass visible and drums visible. Now here's the second trick that I will show you. This is one I like to do. I like to take this meter and add it after the fader. This is a free VU meter, and I'll put the link for it down below. And then I like to set this -12. This is a great little meter. I definitely recommend it if you don't already have a meter, a VU meter that is. And now I'm going to start bringing in my instruments. So let's bring in my drums. I can just double click on those. You know what I'm going to do too here real quick? I'm going to make a loop so I don't have to keep hitting. There we go. Make a loop so I don't have to keep hitting play if it takes me a while to work on this. Okay, so there's my funky, weird Univox drum. Personal preference time, it's a little harsh on the high end, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit of compression to it. I like a 2-to-1 ratio in Mixbus for a drum like this. Don't want to compress it too hard. Okay, so now my goal here is to bring the drums to the point. And you see that the right side is obviously louder than the left side of this particular funky drum, which is fine, whatever. I'm going to try to be hitting a -2 as a peak, or as an average peak, pretty much the whole time it plays. You see that? That's about what I've got. Maybe I can bring it down just a hair. Now I'm going to bring my bass in. Let's go ahead and crush the bass a little bit with the leveler. And the goal here is to hit 0 dB with both the drums and the bass in at the same time. And the theory is that it gives you a good balance between bass and drums. And it's a good place to start your mix to bring in your other instruments. That's a theory. I don't do that on everything, but I do it on most things. I'll make a couple of quick adjustments to my bass because it could have a little more bass, I think. And then I'll probably change things up a little bit. My drums can use a little bit more punch too, and the low end, I think. Made that adjustment. Now if you've got lots of drums on separate tracks, you can still do this trick. You're just going to have to work on a drum mix, and then once you've got it there, maybe send that to a submix and adjust that to get your level. And there's the trick. In theory, I've got a good starting point for the rest of my mix. I can start bringing instruments in, doing whatever. There you go. Hope you found something useful here. If you did, please subscribe to my channel. I'll try to post more new things as I get time. And if you can, please listen to some of my music. That's really all I'm doing this for. So thanks a lot, and I hope to see you again soon.